I've been shockingly surprised at how the dynamics of the housing market have changed. Now, I'm in a city in the Midwest, and the benefit that we have here is the average home is still well below the median price in America, which is about $400,000. And to the average person in America, that $400,000 home is essentially out of reach because the average wage for a single American is around $57,000 a year, where the average household income is around $75,000 a year. Now, taking those two numbers into account, it's very hard for someone to qualify for a $400,000 mortgage with the current interest rates. So if you're in a different city, maybe a city in the Sun Belt or a city on the East Coast or the West Coast, it's going to be much harder to qualify for a home because the median price, the average price in your area is going to be much higher. But here in the Midwest, where I'm at, there are plenty of options. Now, I currently have two homes listed for sale. One of them being my personal residence, which is right around that $400,000 mark, and the other, which was formerly a rental home, which is listed for around $180,000. The $180,000 home is just a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It's been completely remodeled. It's actually in a very good area. And the interesting thing is, I have hardly gotten any traffic on that $180,000 home. Now, as far as my personal residence, I listed it way back in November of last year. And I kind of went into the process knowing that it might take a little bit longer because it was at the higher end of the price range for my market. Now, I've had some traffic on it, but nothing has come to fruition and no contracts have been signed. Getting back to that $180,000 home, I felt very confident that once I listed it, it would not take long to sell at all. The median home price for my area is around $250,000. So this $180,000 home is well below the median for my city, my region. So you would think that it being so affordable, it would attract a lot more buyers. It's basically a starter home and it would sell very quickly. But that is not the case. There has hardly been any traffic on it at all. And yes, I understand it's February and this is a slower season as far as real estate's concerned, but it's actually getting into March where home sales typically pick up. So what exactly is the reason for my houses sitting on the market so long? Is it just the season, or are we actually headed towards a housing correction? In my opinion, I refuse to believe that it is seasonality, especially with the home I have listed for $180,000 that is extremely affordable. If the problem with America is the fact that homes cost too much money, and I have a very nice home listed for a very reasonable price, one would presume that that home would get scooped up very quickly, no matter what time of year it is. Now, a couple things to consider are the fact that rates were actually down the last couple months. They were in the low 6s. So you would presume that people had locked in those rates and they would try to use that locked in rate to purchase a home. Now they're moving back up to the 7s again. And yes, I do realize I'm just a small sample size for the whole market, but to me, it doesn't really look good. If I am to pull up Zillow in my area, there is just a ton of homes listed. And it's not necessarily how many homes are listed, it's how long they've been listed for. And there's more being added to the supply side every single day. So the supply side has been picking up while the demand side is just not there. And that probably has to do with a lot of things. One of the most glaring things is the higher interest rates. They are deterring a lot of buyers because homes are virtually unaffordable at the prices that they're at already, and the higher interest rates are making them even more unaffordable for the average American. And then there's the fact that inflation is here to stay. People forget that prices have not gone back to what they were pre-pandemic. When the government gives its core inflation number, that is just an increase of the previous price that something was originally at. So every month, every year, inflation is always going to be there. We don't have something called deflation. We have something called disinflation, where the rate of inflation decreases. So we've had massive inflation over the last couple years, and all that is happening is the rate at which prices are increasing is slowing down. Yes, all of that prior inflation is here to stay, which means that people have less money to spend on other things. So if I'm the average American and I'm going out there and I'm looking for a home to purchase, I likely have a much lower budget than I would have had, say, 3 or 4 years ago, because everything else is so expensive. Maybe I've had to use my credit card to keep up, and that means my credit card debt is increasing, and that's on my credit report. And when the bank pulls my credit to see how much I can afford for a home loan. They're seeing that increased credit usage. Maybe I had to purchase a new car during the pandemic at those inflated prices, and now I have a very large car payment. All that is going to affect how much home you can afford. And this scenario isn't just anecdotal. Credit card debt is at an all-time high. Car loan delinquencies are on the rise, which means people can't afford their car payments because everything is so expensive. That tells you that post-pandemic, Americans just can't afford as much as they used to. This is coupled with the fact that banks are tightening their lending practices. So they're going to be much more stringent when it comes to qualifying you for your loan. So the only thing left to happen in order for these homes on the market, including mine, to sell is for prices to come down. Now I know some of you might be watching this from the Sun Belt somewhere, or maybe a city on the East or West Coast where prices rose much more significantly than they did here in the Midwest, and now you're seeing some of those prices decline maybe 10, 15%. But here in the Midwest, they've basically stayed the same. We really haven't had any price decreases. I think they've actually ticked up slightly, and I think that is the case for the vast majority of America. So prices are just eventually gonna have to come down. It's unsustainable if nobody's applying for these mortgages because interest rates are still through the roof, or nobody can even afford to apply for the mortgage. Then guess what? Nobody's even gonna be able to sell their home. There are just way too many anecdotal stories like this and way too much data that is pointing towards something a little bit more sinister than all these homes sitting on the market just being from seasonality. Now, I'm not a real estate agent, but I'm a real estate investor, so I try to keep a good tab on the market and try to, have a good feel of what's going on. And to me, it just seems like a ton of buildup in supply. So is it the fact that it is still February, why things are still slow? Is it because interest rates are still high? Is it because there is a lot more going on in the economy than the mainstream media would lead you to believe? Now, this could take all year to play out, but eventually prices are going to have to come down. I mean, consider this. Most people sell their home because they picked up a new job in another city. Well, what exactly are they supposed to do if they can't sell that home? Are they supposed to not take that job offer in another city? No, eventually they're going to drop their price enough in order to sell that home, and they're going to take that job and move to the other city. And that's eventually going to happen across the board in order to level the playing field, which means we could be headed for a housing correction. Now, I'm not even going to get into the topic of recession in this video, but that is absolutely what I believe is on the horizon. You can look at the data and clearly see this playing out. Just this past week, multiple countries declared that they were actually in a recession, and these are some of the largest economies in the world. And what do you know? Their stock markets are at an all-time high, and their unemployment is at an all-time low. So just because your 401k or your index fund is doing good and you're getting great returns does not mean that we're not headed for a recession. All the data taken together points towards an economic decline, which definitely doesn't help the housing market. So if you've been considering selling your home, my personal opinion is to sell it as quickly as possible. I think that I was a little bit late to the game and I should have put my house on the market mid last year, and I probably would have saved myself a lot of trouble. I was hoping to sell both of these houses so I could actually have a good stack of cash set aside for some of the opportunities that might be on the horizon, because I firmly believe that people got in over their heads as far as investment properties are concerned, and I'd like to pick some of those up, and you should too. So if you're seeing some of these same things in your city, in your metro area, I'd be curious to know. Drop it in the comments down below and let me know what you think. I hope you like this video, guys. If you got any questions, comments, please drop it down below. And as always, till next time.